So on Sunday, this is going to be the UK government's official COVID day of reflection, marking 5 years since the pandemic. Lionel, I think it's fair to say that one thing that won't be reflected on is the lockdown and the horrors of the COVID response. This is something that has, exercised you in particular, exercises all of us. But how do you think we've come to the place where we've memory hold probably one of the most significant events of our lifetime in recent history? It's played no role at all in public debate lately.
And it hasn't played a role in the consequences for politicians.
Mm.
I mean, you would think, given how ineffective lockdowns were and how destructive, how much evidence we've got that they didn't really accomplish anything epidemiologically. I love being able to say that.
One go as well. That's very impressive.
Tongue twister.
It's a word you haven't used in a while, I'm sure.
Why we don't talk about it? I think it's a terrible memory, and that's interesting to me because if you'll recall, especially during the first one, the weather was really great, and everyone talked about what a wonderful time they were having.
Sourdough bread.
So why isn't this like, oh gosh, I remember that first lockdown, and why don't we reminisce about it? But we don't. Nobody wants to talk about it. I mean, I just walking around London this last week, I keep coming across these stickers like on the pavement. Please keep your distance, and I just shudder. I shudder, and therefore, I don't think it's just me. I think that we all found it horrifying, and just do this. It's just don't want to think about it, and I think that inclination is to be resisted, because we handled COVID in the UK horribly, and we handled it horribly internationally. The entire phenomenon of lockdown should never have happened. We were copying communist China. We were defying all our pandemic plans, both in the US and the UK that I know of. It was a panicked, irrational, bureaucratic response without any scientific basis. And then we had subsequent, edicts that also didn't make any sense. All that absolute absurdity about whether a Scotch egg was a substantial meal, as if a substantial meal made any difference to whether or not you were going to get COVID. I mean, it was an insane time, and there's nothing to be proud of. And the only thing that we should be able to get out of it is to take a look at it and to say, how did we let this happen? Why didn't we subject this to critical debate? Why did we shut down even our own press, which we harnessed to shut everybody up? I mean, it is a shameful period of, if nothing else, British life. And as a matter of fact, I would have to say that the one thing that I'm probably proudest of in my nonfiction life is that I was one of the very first journalists to stick my neck out. It was the third week in March 2020. And I said, these lockdowns are a terrible idea. And this pandemic is not bad enough in terms of fatality rate to be doing something this drastic. And it's not likely to be effective. That's probably my greatest act of journalistic bravery, and I'll stick by it. But I subsequently had a lot of company, right? Toby Young, etc. I'm still reading the Daily Skeptic every morning. But it's important to face when you have made mistakes and to come to terms with them. And I'm a little worried that the UK is not going to contend with the error of its pandemic ways for a generation. And that's long enough for another disease to come along.
Oh, I really share your horror whenever you come across those stickers on the ground or those marks. It's like kind of happening across the kind of old symbols of the old regime or something. That chill goes through you. And I obviously completely agree on the point of the folly of lockdowns. Spike was similar in terms of very early on pointing out what a insane authoritarian experiment this was.
Before it happened.
No, exactly. Yeah, I've got a lot of flack for that.
Yeah.
Trying to control a virus via state authoritarianism always seems to be a bit of a non-starter. But I often say to people, like, even if ultimately you agreed with the policy or you enjoyed your first lockdown or whatever it might be, the way in which it happened, the way in which it was done should terrify you. I mean, the fact that Parliament basically lobotomised itself, basically declared itself to be non-essential and went home. Matt Hancock was essentially empowered to rule by decree during that period using the public health regulations. He was making and unmaking law at the strike of his pen when his hands weren't otherwise busy, as it later turned out. I mean, this is a fundamental affront to not just liberty but democracy.
Yeah.
The fact that happened unthinkingly, just because that's what other countries were doing, just because there was significant media hysteria, should chill anyone who cares the least bit about freedom and democracy. But again, it's something which, for the sake of memory holding the horrendous experience of lockdown and memory holding the fact that Matt Hancock was ever a thing, you can understand why people do it. But it's really important politically and for society that we resist that temptation, as you say, Lionel.